Now then, let's zoom out for a continental view, specifically on the problem of how Africans can move around from one country to another on the continent. 28 out of 54 African countries now allow for essentially visa-free intra-African travel. That at least is according to the Africa Visa Openness Index 2025 edition published by the African Development Bank and the African Union Commission. Right at the top of that list, Rwanda, Gambia and Kenya. Now, the index essentially measures the visa policy each country applies to citizens of the other 53 states on the continent. And it classifies them essentially into three buckets: visa-free, visa on arrival and visa before travel. For decades, Africans have struggled to travel freely around the continent. Visas to visit fellow African states are hard to secure, costly and very limited in scope. It's not surprising to get a single entry visa limited to around 30 days. It might cost you the better part of $100. The Pan-African dream of unfettered travel between countries still remains a long way from reality. Dr. Joy Kategekwa is the director of the Regional Integration Coordination Office at the African Development Bank. In the 2024 Visa Openness Index, she pointed out that while some progress has been made, African countries are far from where they need to be. When we spoke some hours ago, I asked her if that's still the case in 2025.
Indeed, it is still the case. 28.2% is progress, if you see it from where we started in 2020, which was 20%, but it's far from where we want to be in an integrated and prosperous Africa. And so we must continue to work hard to make sure that happens. What gives me hope is that in the regional economic communities, you see something different. You see visa-free access almost as a rights-based issue. You see that in ECOWAS, you see that in the East African community, and somewhat in COMESA, and therefore lifting from the practice of the REX to continental scale is the job ahead of us.
One of the goals of the African Continental Free Trade Areas, set up this big market of $1.4 billion people, not $1.4 billion, 1.4 billion people. But what is the opportunity cost that African countries are incurring through these barriers to travel within the continent?
Lost gains, lost economic gains. When you think about it, at the very core, the visa keeps the Africans out. And so there you have lost gains in tourism already. Secondly, when you think about conference tourism, which brings in a larger part of the economy, those are lost gains as well. The African Continental Free Trade Area specifically seeks to open markets for certain types of service provision. 5 sectors are pointed out: transport, communication, tourism, and so on and so forth. And so in the absence of that, you're locking out opportunity for Africans in this way. So it is something we have to keep working on to ensure that what is envisaged in this one African market is actually attained. Remember, the goods don't move themselves, people move the goods.
The recommendations that are being made here are pretty sensible, pretty straightforward, right? Making multiple entry visas the default, for example. Like if you're coming into the East African community, you get a visa for one country, gives you access to pretty much the entire bloc, and linking the validity period of those visas to travel documents. Governments do know this. So what reasons are they giving for not implementing these ideas?
When you look at the report, what it tells us is that over the last 10 years, no country has had a linear move to visa-free. There have been up and down sort of swings. It tells you that governments are confronting a lot, whether it be concerns about fragility and security, whether it's concerns about job losses. The political will is strong, but we now must match it by walking the talk on the economic side. When you look at fragile regions, for example, in the central belt of Africa, that's where you see the least performance in terms of regions. So perhaps that has something to do with that. But what gives me hope is that the countries that have given visa-free Africa tell a story about the need to invest in the systems that create confidence, the systems that build trust. That way, you manage the risk rather than walking away from it or avoiding it altogether.
Can we go into a bit more detail on countries that have done this and it's really worked out well for them? Because I know we speak about the concerns, the risks more often than not, but we don't often pay as much attention to the countries that have gone ahead and said, you know what, we'll make it easier for Africans to come to our country. And these are the results that we have gotten out of it over the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, let's look at Kenya, for example, a powerful story about reform and what policy reform does for an economy. Last year in the report, Kenya performed differently precisely because of the implications of the electronic travel authorization. What we've seen now is a policy shift where all but 2 African countries can enter, the citizens of those countries can enter Kenya visa-free. What that has meant, obviously, is gains in tourism, as I spoke about, gains in conference tourism, but also in trade and investment, given it's a hub for the sub-region. So if you want to see other countries, for example, Rwanda, another story in that direction. And so there's a lot to gain when you maintain a visa-free policy. In fact, it's a deliberate choice for accelerating development.
Finally, are we any closer to a scenario now where a visa to one country in a regional bloc, like SADC, for example, will then give you access to all countries who are members of that bloc, or is still that a vision that's still some time away?
We're there in the context of East Africa. You try and get into a portal, there will be that option for East African visa. That tells you that things are moving. On the West Africa bloc, you have ECOWAS considering what they call the Eco Visa, which is something in a similar direction. Finally, countries like Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Botswana are also trying what they call the Casa Uni Visa, I think it's called. And so we need to see much more of this. But frankly, Rama, from my side, what we'd really truly need is accelerated implementation of the free movement protocol that allows for entry, residing, and establishment. And if that takes too long, let's create an Africa zone where those countries that are signing up can do precisely what you're saying, which is enter these territories visa-free. Let's then track what that means in terms of economic prosperity. That might shine a light that makes others want to join faster.